June 27, 1954, Jacobo Arbenz delivers his final address to the nation. He condemns the United States for its role in the events unfolding in Guatemala and rejects the accusation that he is a communist. He describes his resignation as a decision made under overwhelming external pressure. The next morning, he leaves the presidential palace and takes refuge in the Mexican embassy. Soon after, he goes into exile.
In 1950, Guatemala had the first communist-dominated government in the Western Hemisphere.
We're watching a documentary about Guatemala in 1962.
Under the presidency of Colonel Jacobo Arbenz Guzman, Guatemala was well on its way to becoming the first full-fledged member of the communist bloc on this side of the Atlantic.
The narrator is talking about communism spreading through Latin America and how the United States stepped in just in time
For the overthrow of Arbenz and the temporary removal of communism from the Western Hemisphere.
What he fails to mention is that just 8 years earlier, Guatemala had a democratically elected president trying to give land to the poor, land that, in many cases, belonged to a powerful American fruit company. And he definitely doesn't say that the president was overthrown not by his people, but by a foreign intelligence agency. What followed wasn't freedom. It was decades of dictatorship, civil war, and one of the largest genocides in modern Latin American history. Since the start of the 20th century, Guatemala has been dominated by United Fruit, a powerful multinational fruit corporation, through their banana plantations, railroads, and ports. By this point, over 70% of Guatemala's farmland is controlled by just 3% of landowners. So Arbenz introduces a simple but radical plan. Take unused land from the largest estates, compensate the owners, and give it to people who will actually farm it, a policy that directly targets the powerful United Fruit. When the government moves to seize some of its unused land and offers compensation based on the company's own declared value, around $1.2 million, the company is outraged and demands far more with backing from Washington. When Arbenz refuses, he unknowingly places himself in the sights of some of the most powerful forces in the world. In Washington, Guatemala is no longer being talked about as a small country reforming its economy, but as a problem. Reports begin circulating through the Central Intelligence Agency and the State Department that Jacobo Arbenz is drifting toward communism. John Foster Dulles, as Secretary of State, is one of the most powerful people in the government. His brother Alan is pretty successful too, being the head of the CIA. The thing is, both brothers have personal ties to United Fruit, and a few weeks back, a couple of United Fruit board members held a secret meeting with the two brothers to address their concerns that Arbenz was an asset of the Soviets, concerns that, by late 1953, would help push the CIA to launch Operation PB Success. The operation isn't a full invasion, it's quieter than that. The CIA recruits a small force of exiles, placing them under the command of Carlos Castillo Armas. It's technically an army, but in reality, it's tiny, far too small to take a country by force. But that's not the point, because this operation isn't really about fighting. It's about convincing everyone that the fight is already lost. By June 1954, the rebel force led by Carlos Castillo Armas numbers fewer than 500 men, and on the ground, things aren't going well. A 122-man attack on the border town Zacapa was intercepted and beaten by a 30-man garrison. A force targeting Puerto Barrios was repelled by local police and armed dock workers, forcing most of the rebels to flee back to Honduras. Militarily, the invasion is weak and nowhere near enough to overthrow a government. But that was never really the plan. A CIA-run radio station calling itself Voice of Liberation begins broadcasting across the country, reporting constant rebel victories. At the same time, CIA-backed aircraft carry out small-scale bombing raids on Guatemala City and key targets. The damage is limited, but the explosions are loud and visible. Inside Guatemala, perception starts to overtake reality. Army officers hear the broadcasts, they see the bombings, and many begin to believe that Castillo Armas is only the front of a much larger US-backed invasion. So on June 27, 1954, Arbenz resigns, not after a decisive defeat, but because he's been pushed into a position where defeat feels unavoidable. In his final speech, he denies being a communist and blames the United States for the crisis unfolding in his country. Soon after, he seeks asylum and leaves Guatemala. Days later, Carlos Castillo Armas takes power with US backing. And just like that, Guatemala's time with democracy comes to an end. He returns over 1.5 million acres to United Fruit and also outlaws a number of trade unions. Almost immediately, repression begins. Thousands of suspected supporters of Jacobo Arbenz are arrested, blacklisted, or forced into exile. Over the next 4 decades, Guatemala descends into a brutal civil war. What starts as political repression evolves into a full-scale internal conflict between government forces and leftist insurgents. Backed at various points by the United States, successive military regimes expand their campaigns against not just guerrilla fighters, but entire communities suspected of sympathizing with them. As guerrilla organizations like the Guerrilla Army of the Poor and the Revolutionary Organization of the People in Arms gained support in Guatemala's impoverished highlands, the military increasingly viewed indigenous Maya communities not as neutral civilians, but as the social base of insurgency itself. Entire villages were reclassified as internal enemies. Following years of escalating disappearances, massacres, and political assassinations, the violence reached its most brutal stage after General Efraín Ríos Montt seized power in a 1982 coup. Presenting himself as a born-again Christian reformer, Ríos Montt publicly promised moral renewal and national salvation. But behind that rhetoric, his regime unleashed one of the most devastating counterinsurgency campaigns in the Western Hemisphere. The Guatemalan military sought to destroy guerrilla influence by annihilating the civilian populations believed to support them. Hundreds of Maya villages were systematically targeted in scorched earth operations. Between 1981 and 1983 alone, some of the worst atrocities occurred. The army destroyed more than 600 villages. The United Nations-sponsored Historical Clarification Commission later documented over 200,000 deaths or disappearances during the broader conflict, concluding that state forces were responsible for approximately 93% of human rights violations. More than 80% of the victims were indigenous Maya. The coup in 1954 did not directly cause every massacre that followed, but it created the political architecture that made them possible. What was presented as a victory against communism had instead set the stage for one of the deadliest conflicts in modern Latin American history.
Chet Huntley reporting. Good night.